One of the darlings of the Oscars in 2024, the film Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan, which took home 7 statuettes, has sparked curiosity about the development and effects of nuclear weapons. The narrative portrays the events surrounding the testing of the first atomic bomb on July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, United States. After this historic milestone, 2 atomic bombs were employed during the final stages of World War II, devastating the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, on August 6 and 9, 1945. In today's video, we'll delve into the primary effects caused in the event of a possible nuclear war in modern times. It's worth emphasizing the importance of understanding the consequences of this type of war to reflect on the advances in territorial conflicts ongoing in different parts of the world. The effects of a nuclear war were depicted with moderation in the film, The Day After, which impressed many and sparked intense debates at the time. However, as reality tends to surpass imagination, studies on the global consequences of multiple nuclear explosions have shown that a severe winter affecting virtually the entire globe could occur following a massive nuclear war. These studies are based on the effects of volcanic eruptions that emit immense quantities of dust particles into the atmosphere, preventing the passage of sunlight over large areas. This would cause a decrease in solar energy reaching the Earth's surface, resulting in a planet cooling process in the case of simultaneous nuclear explosions involving many thousands of megatons. The smoke from the affected cities and burned forests, along with the dust thrown into the atmosphere, can drastically reduce the planet's temperature from 2 weeks to a year of intense winter. However, the effects still depend not only on the quantity of nuclear bombs detonated but also on the locations affected, such as oceans and land. Strategists believe that if a nuclear attack is triggered by one power, it would inevitably be responded to by another, leading to a substantial portion of accumulated weapons being launched. Thus, there is no defense with missiles carrying the bombs, as many have multiple warheads, meaning they carry several bombs that separate from the missile, hitting different targets. Anti-missile weapons would also be ineffective in this scenario because once launched against the enemy, the missiles would certainly be detected by highly effective electronic equipment in time for the enemy to launch their own missiles. Nuclear explosions disrupt the innermost structure of matter, breaking apart and rearranging atomic nuclei composed of protons and neutrons bound by strong nuclear forces much more intense than the electromagnetic forces responsible for electron-nucleus bonding and interatomic and intermolecular connections that give matter the characteristics we perceive macroscopically in gases, liquids, and solids. With the atomic bomb, in addition to this shockwave effect being greatly amplified by the greater amount of energy released in the explosion, other effects occur. For example, while heat is released in conventional bombs capable of causing fires, temperatures are much higher in nuclear explosions, reaching temperatures similar to those of the sun. Moreover, the pressure at the point of explosion rises to millions of times the normal atmospheric pressure. Fission bombs, also known as atomic bombs or A-bombs, were responsible for the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with a force ranging from 15 kilotons to 20 kilotons of TNT. Modern nuclear fusion weapons, also called hydrogen bombs or H-bombs, are much more powerful. In reality, these bombs are so powerful that they use a detonation of atomic bombs by fission as a trigger for detonation. Therefore, the energy released by the initial fission chain reaction is used to fuse hydrogen atoms inside the weapon, and this reaction in turn releases even more neutrons that create more fission, leading to more fusion, and so on. The result, according to the Union of Concerned Scientists, is a fireball with temperatures reaching equivalent to those inside the sun. These thermonuclear bombs have been tested but never used in combat. The experiment that led to the detonation of the Tsar Bomba, tested in 1961 in the Novaya Zemlya archipelago almost 20 years after the explosions of the Fat Man and Little Boy bombs, is the largest in human history. The Tsar Bomba is considered the most powerful weapon. Its explosion would result in an immense mushroom-shaped cloud with a height of 60 kilometers, a diameter of 35 kilometers, and displacement of air mass that could cause damage within a radius of 1,000 kilometers. In this explosion, it is estimated that third-degree burns could be caused to people located up to 100 kilometers away, and the radiation diffusion could subsequently make nearby living beings sick. One pertinent piece of information is that after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a nuclear bomb has never been used in warfare again, even though it still poses a threat to humanity as it could cause fatal and devastating damage to both people and the environment. In April 2022, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov drew global attention by warning of the risk of a potential nuclear war. However, analysts and historians still disagree on the exact dimensions of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. While the war between the two nations is entering its third year without signs of a suitable end, some suggest that the conflict in Ukraine might be viewed within the context of a sort of second Cold War, while others argue that it could indeed trigger a third world war. According to Yen Bremer from the Eurasia Consultancy, the war in Europe poses risks not only for the continent but also for the rest of the world, which finds itself in a more violent and unstable scenario. According to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, an organization that analyzes the risks of nuclear weapon use, it is estimated that there are over 9,500 nuclear warheads worldwide, meaning there are 9,500 explosive devices containing radioactive material designed to be used as weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear warheads constitute the primary component of a nuclear weapon and are responsible for the release of nuclear energy during an explosion. However, the number of nuclear warheads varies. Other research in 2022 showed that the United States has around 5,550, while Russia is said to possess 5,977 explosive devices. Together, these two countries would control over 90% of the total existing nuclear bombs globally, which would be enough to destroy all life on Earth several times over. Scientists assert that a modern nuclear war could potentially kill up to 5 billion people due to the impact of global famine triggered by the soot that would block sunlight, affecting a large portion of the planet's crops. These casualties would be greater than those caused by the initial explosions due to the drop in the planet's temperature, which could reach 40 degrees below zero. The estimates were based on calculations of how much soot would enter the atmosphere from firestorms triggered by the detonation of nuclear weapons. Researchers utilized a climate prediction tool used by the United States National Center for Atmospheric Research, which allowed for the estimation of the productivity of each country's major crops in this scenario. Regardless of the scale of each territorial conflict, even a relatively small-scale war would have devastating consequences for global food production. According to this study, a localized battle between India and Pakistan would reduce crop yields by about 7% in 5 years, while a war between the United States and Russia would cause a 90% drop in production within 3 to 4 years. The concept of nuclear winter gained widespread recognition in 1983 when an article about this phenomenon was published. Signed by several scientists, including the renowned Carl Sagan, within the context of nuclear warfare, a certain number of detonated bombs could result in the soot from the explosions and subsequent fires rising to the stratosphere, potentially causing a blockage of sunlight on our planet. In theory, this blockage could be strong enough to lower global temperatures for several years, initiating a long-term nuclear winter that would hinder agricultural production on land. The consequence of this nuclear winter would lead to widespread famine among the world's population, regardless of the locations where the bombs were detonated. Depending on the quantity and capacity of the nuclear bombs used, the intensity of this phenomenon would be even more extensive. An article published in the scientific journal Nature Food, in August 2022, referencing climate models of agricultural crop behavior, and fish stocks, to estimate the consequences of various nuclear war scenarios, accurately demonstrated the damage to civilizations on the planet due to the lack of food from agricultural production in the mid-latitudes and main cultivation areas of the planet, which have always relied on the seasons of sun and rain without radioactivity for fertility and supply to nations. After the horror of the explosions and radiation, a prolonged but much more devastating phenomenon caused by nuclear hell would emerge. Following the damage caused by atomic bombs in the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world realized that it had entered the nuclear age because, for the first time in history, a species had developed the means to annihilate itself. The nuclear issue has since become one of the main topics of international politics. Since then, countries have sought ways to prevent this catastrophe and have been striving to create agreements to help achieve this goal. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, 9 countries possess nuclear weapons: the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, China, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. It is believed that Israel is also part of this list, although the country neither confirms nor denies possessing nuclear weapons. This mystery is characterized by a policy called nuclear opacity. In this unstable scenario, the Korean Peninsula, a stage of constant international tensions since the end of World War II, when it was divided into two opposing regimes represented by North Korea and South Korea, has become a region marked by the development and testing of nuclear weapons conducted after North Korea's withdrawal from the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, in January 2003, of which it had been a part since 1985. At the time, North Koreans justified their withdrawal by claiming that the International Atomic Energy Agency acted as a subordinate to U.S. foreign policy interests, and the treaty would be a tool for achieving those interests. Despite declaring that its withdrawal from the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons did not mean that the country intended to develop nuclear weapons, just 3 years later, in October 2006, North Korea conducted its first test with an atomic bomb. Since then, 5 other nuclear tests have been conducted, and numerous other ballistic missile tests that could carry a nuclear warhead. In response, the UN Security Council has been imposing a series of sanctions on North Korea since 2006, which impose significant political and economic restrictions on the country. It is important to note that these sanctions are even supported by China, as although the country is North Korea's largest international ally, the Chinese do not view favorably the instability caused by the nuclear threat that North Korea brought close to its border. According to Vitello Brustolin, a researcher at Harvard University, a nuclear war is highly unlikely. However, that does not mean that a conventional armed conflict between specific states will not occur. If force is indeed used, it is likely to be through non-nuclear means. The professor explains that it is not in the interest of countries to increase the production of nuclear weapons because after a certain point, the increase in quantity would imply redundancy, considering that the currently known arsenal is already capable of destroying the planet. According to research centers on the non-proliferation of atomic bombs on the planet, 30% to 40% of the arsenals of the United States and Russia consist of smaller bombs with a range of less than 500 kilometers by land and less than 600 kilometers by sea or air. Nonetheless, these weapons would still have devastating impacts near the explosion zone but would not create the scenario of a global nuclear apocalypse. Meanwhile, the governments of these countries have not disclosed the locations where their nuclear warheads are hidden. However, according to experts, most are installed on submarines, which makes their location difficult. And that's all for now, until next time, bye.